So we are now looking at tying the last 2 days together with animal performance. And the reason we leave it for last because it is the most important. And I have already said to you, you'll probably only implement 2% of what you've heard. And I would like you to implement this 2% that you're going to be hearing today, because it's very, very important. Animal performance is about the money. And if you're not making money, you're not destined to stay on that property for too long. That's the name of the game. So I have, over time, changed my mind in terms of how you describe animal performance and how you achieve animal performance. But ultimately, we go and we use the holistic management decision-making process, because that is the best method I've come across in taking this complex, multi-dimensional situation called nature and the environment, putting it into a linear format, making a decision, putting it all back together again, and carrying on using livestock to improve the situation. So we look at the animal, and we've looked at her before in terms of the ability she has to reclimate land and do things. And remember, the life in that barrel is similar to the life outside the barrel. So when she goes and defecates, she's inoculating soil and helping regenerate, which everybody thinks is the word that's going to save the world. Big business has hijacked every single name and working that has been put to any operation that is going to help people on the land. And I promise you, regeneration is going to be hijacked by big business. Does anybody not believe me? It's already happening, comes from the front. So whatever happens, do what you have to do. Get selective hearing. Do not waste time listening and trying to convince people who will not change anyway. Don't waste your time. It gets quite lonely, but it gets very, very, very rewarding. So we continue and we understand what's involved, and it's the soil, it's the grasses, it's animals, and ultimately animal performance. So we go back to a slide we've already seen and discussed, and there it is. We take one bite off the top of most plants. We have to be able to grow carbon, and then the question comes, do we put in irrigation to grow carbon? The cost to put in the irrigation to grow the carbon doesn't guarantee you carbon, because the irrigation, like in our country, we don't have electricity for 12 hours a day. Be careful, people. We are experiencing something that you might have later. I don't know when, but it's not a matter of if, it's when. So we take one bite off the top of the plant so the plant does not stop growing automatically, and you've seen it. I've gone through it in detail as to what actually happens. I tried to simplify it. You just start and you monitor as you go, making sure that all along you have got animal performance, and you were watching that cow take the one bite off most plants, and there it is, and that's what happens. And we go back and watch the cows, because not always what the textbook says actually happens on the ground. So we are learning, and inclusion zones help teach us what we can do with our soils, our livestock on my property or our property, with the amount of rainfall we get, because it's all part of the whole, and we manage it accordingly. We grow the grasses or whatever plants are growing there, be they clovers or anything else, and we manage them accordingly to get animal performance and then to plant grass. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a difference in terms of recovery of the grasses when it's been trampled versus having that one bite off?
I would say yes, because if they trample, they are bruised, and it takes time for that, so it might be a hesitation of 3 days instead of a week. So in actual fact, they will come back a little bit quicker than if you took more than one bite. So trampling is better than eating to the ground. Eating to the ground, you will not, it'll take time. That plant will stop growing, and it takes time for it to start photosynthesizing. Good. So we move on. We allow for selection to achieve animal performance at least cost. Now, people, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know in nature selection makes animals fat. So why now try and do non-selective grazing? Non-selective grazing is going into a situation where you are putting yourself at huge risk. So you go and you do your non-selective grazing, you trash everything to the ground. Nobody tells you how much you have to supplement those animals to keep them alive, the cost of that. And then the worst case scenario is it doesn't rain. And it might not rain, depending on where you live, for 3 to 7 years, whatever. And then you have a desert. Now you're trying to fix a desert, but you've got no carbon to work with. It's a disaster. In nature, selection makes animals fat. So we don't reinvest the wheel. We understand that. It's trampling that puts the carbon down. So we get non-selective trampling within the herd of these animals with the predator-prey relationship, treading down the grass, getting the carbon in and on the soil. And I've explained all that to you. And we just start doing it. And the result will come. So again, we go to that picture, which I keep on having on the screen, and I know Greg dreads those slides. But unfortunately, they're part of the story that I can tell to reaffirm to you, you do not need to produce any more seeds. The seeds are there. But to get those seeds to germinate is another story. So we need livestock. So livestock plant grass. Without livestock, you're not going to change anything. So get on with it. Put livestock on, but they've got to have food. Now, if you've got a desert with no food, you've got a bit of a problem. But that's another story for another day. So we go, and I went to a course with a fellow called Dr. Dick Diven, and he had huge information. And I'll give you some of that information. Sadly, it's been taken off the internet. It's no longer available to everybody, but this is what he did. So he measured the amount of energy available at soil surface level for the average latitude of North America. He measured and put on a web graph, and there you have it. In May, you've got the most amount of energy recorded at soil surface level. Units of energy, all from the sun, free and for nothing. So he measured those, and he's plotted it on that graph. And if you can interpret the web graph, it's in the northern hemisphere. It is straightforward to read. I'll leave it up there for a minute, or not quite a minute, but a few seconds for you to absorb what's going on there, because you need to remember this when we get to the next slide, because it is of utmost importance for you to get the right time of calving. Did you understand the word calving? To make sure that you are utilizing free energy to set the wheel turning for time and management on your ranch. Obviously, I pushed the right button. The silence is golden.
In the case of the drought that Greg's going through, does that shift it when the rain comes?
Don't complicate the issue. Listen, get me to finish doing what I'm doing or presenting what I'm presenting, and you won't have a question.
What is an NEM? I didn't hear that.
Energy.
It's a unit of energy. Keep it simple. Unit of energy. You don't need to know all the nitty-gritties. Right, we go to the next slide. He then put on a wet graph. Sorry, you've got to look around me. Rather large, you know. You might have to move your chair. Okay. He put on a graph the amount of energy required by a lactating cow from the time she calves all the way through the year to reconception, all the way through to her next calving. That's what it looks like. So 1 is when she calves, irrespective of date. We come to the rest of the story a few slides down. We superimpose the two graphs, one on top of the other, understanding that 80% of the fetus growth takes place in the last 2 months of pregnancy. We also take note that the condition of the cow at calving will dictate the number of cattle that will reconceive. I tell you that now because everybody's worried about reconception. I will tell you reconception is irrelevant in the next breath, but you choose which direction you want to go. So we superimpose them, and there you have where the red line is above the black line. There is excess energy from the sun, free and for nothing, to put fat on the back of a cow. Fat is energy. And if you look at that, she is at peak condition when she drops that calf. Now, what is that going to do? 1, she doesn't have to leave the calf. Because she's got this excess energy on her back, she looks after the calf. She doesn't have to go off and graze. The dissolving of that fat gives her enough moisture she doesn't even have to go off and drink. She looks after the calf until the calf can move and go with her. And then there's a dramatic drop in the first month in terms of the requirement. Thirdly, which I have not mentioned yet, that fat is extremely important for colostrum. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Good. For the colostrum, for the calf. Because the colostrum is the template for the life of the calf. If your animal is not in the condition to be able to supply the calf with colostrum, that calf is going to be a dinky for most of its life and will probably only reconceive, conceive for the first time at 6 years of age. Now guys, I'm talking from experience here. I'm not just telling you a story from a textbook. So if your calf does not get enough colostrum and the right quality of colostrum, it's going to be a dinky. And you will understand why when I start putting up onto the biological calendar marketing of animals, you get rid of that dinky because it's never going to do anything for you. The quicker you get rid of it and put it into cash flow, the better it's going to be for you. Any questions about that graph, people? You're welcome. We can spend a bit of time on discussing this because it is important. Yes, ma'am.
Is the cow rebred at the end when it gets back to 1?
Yes.
What was the question?
Is the cow rebred, is the cow rebred when we get back to 1? Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I've heard that the peak nutritional needs are at peak lactation. How does the peak lactation fit into those needs?
I'm not prepared to answer that because I don't know enough. But this is information that came from Dick Diven, and he was a scientist who went into extension service with the government, and he was a very practical guy. And the notes he wrote was from experience, like I talk from experience, and these are what he told us was fact. Okay, so I'm not equipped to argue that or suggest anything else. Okay, yes, sir.
Is this graph downloaded on the USB? Did you download this graph onto the?
Yes, it's all there, people. Yes, sir. You're right. Good. Yes, sir.
So this would indicate you want to have your baby June. Like you said.
I don't know. We'll look for the biological calendar. Oh, wait. Don't jump the gun. Yes, sir.
Would you mind backing up one slide?
Sorry?
Do you mind backing up one slide?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good. So we now go to a linear format that we as humble humans can understand, and we put it on a worksheet. So this is a financial worksheet which we take and we divide the squares. You can see we put the classes of animals on the left hand side. Cows, I beg your pardon, calves, heifers 1, heifers 2, cows, bulls, and bull's a bull, or whatever age he is, and then steers 1 and steers 2, because I'm now using those animals with wings that have come down from heaven just at the right time of the year to eat the spare grass that I've got, and we move on accordingly. So we've divided the squares, as you can see there with a pencil line. We go to our cows and we write in orange when the cows are going to calve. And note, these cows are calving in 1 month. So we fill in 1 month, and that is when my cows are going to calve. And if I know when they're calving, I know when the bulls go in. You go to a bulling chart, and that is the green, and you go in the square below the numbers there. So we go back to the calving, the orange, and if you go up to calves, you'll see in the square there 1. It means the calves at that time are 1 month old. People, this is part of the curricula for holistic management, but for some unknown reason, certified educators in this country don't seem to teach this. Without this, you can't fill in the livestock production worksheet and anything else that might lead to the financials. So I spend a lot of time on this. It's important. It's extremely important. It can make or break you. So there's the calf of 1 month old, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Up to the top there. There is 7, and we wrap around to 8, 9, 10, 11, and at that month of the year, all animals change classes. Calves become heifers 1 and steers 1. Heifers 1 become heifers 2 cows, etc. Because when they reach the anniversary, they change weight and they change class and they change value. So you'll see there, we're changing, and I'll take a simple one. Calves at 11 months go to heifers 1, okay, which is 12, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, etc. Changed classes, changed weight, changed value. And so we go on, and when a heifer 2 gets to 35 months, she goes to a cow, which then you just put plus. All animals here change class. A calf at 11 months will then go to a heifer 1 at 12 months. And a heifer's 1 at 23 months will go to a heifer 2 at 35 months. Once you go older than that into a cow, you just put a plus, because a cow then is residual. If you send it to slaughter, you'll get slaughter value for it. Or you'll, whatever you, even somebody else to buy it for breeding, will only pay slaughter value. Okay, so now I've told you that 80% of the fetus growth takes place in the last 2 months of pregnancy. I draw a red line because not only that is the fetus growth taking place in the last 2 months of pregnancy, but the condition of that cow at calving will determine the reconception rate. So we draw that red line because that red line will dictate and indicate to me that animal performance needs to be optimal at that time. So we carry on, it's optimal until we take the bulls out. So we draw a red line there and we box that area off, because during that area you do not take vacations, you do not leave the property, because you need to make sure that that animal has enough nutrition. Remember, I've sold to you, if you buy any open cows, 90% to 99% of the time, it's nutrition and not a DNA or a genetic problem with the animal. The animal might be large, so it takes more energy to do all these functions. And that's why we tend to look for smaller animals, because maintenance energy requirements are less in smaller animals than bigger animals. So we go on, and this is why we calve in a month, in 30 days, because wild animals all calve in a very short space of time, so that when the predators come along and eat the calves, which they're going to do, there are so many calves that they can only take a percentage of them, and a higher percentage is left behind because they're all coming at once. But you are humans and different, and you've taken nature by the throat, and some scientist has told you if you leave the bulls in, you'll get more calves. It's potentially a lie. But if you extend that orange or the bulling another 30 days, all of a sudden it increases the time that you need maximum nutrition. You're putting yourself under stress. So then you want to expose your cows to the bulls for another 30 days, and we're now exposing the cows at 90 days. And if you were to record the conception of those cows, you'd find less and less cows are actually giving birth in the last 30 days. And as somebody spoke earlier, some people have a cutoff date and they sell those cows, because when you're comparing or weaning a calf and there's a difference of 3 months in the age of those calves, it makes a difference. And always the older calf is going to be doing better than the others. Hold on. So we move on, and we've got this line, which I've got for my animals in Africa, because I have to dehorn them. So they come into the pens, I dehorn the calves, I brand them. I've got to brand at a very young age, 2 months, otherwise the calves get stolen. But not only that, we have to inoculate the cows for anthrax, and it's the one time of the year that the cattle go into the pens. So my herd, which was quite a large number of cows, were calving. As they calved, they were left behind and the herd moved forward, and I got to 100 cows with their calves behind. I put them together and they moved as a herd until the calves were 2 to 2.5 months old. They could fit into the crawls, and it was a day's work to dehorn and brand 100 calves and not feel stressed. That is now the beginning of the main herd. As we calve, the big herd reduces, the main herd with cows and calves starts growing, getting bigger and bigger, and you prioritize grazing because they are the ones that need to get the best grazing to reconceive for the next year, and we move accordingly. So we've done the dehorning, and then later we look at our animals, we put the bulls in, and hopefully the cows reconceive. Here I'm actually mating 15 and 16-month-old heifers. In this country you can do it. I've said to you that your soil is good enough for us in Africa to use your soil as fertilizer in Africa. We cannot do that. We only mate our heifers at 27, 28 months for the first time, because we cannot capture enough energy, bricks in the grasses to get our animals to conceive at that time. They are immature. Hang on, I've got a question here. I will ask you now. You had a question?
Just wondering, the heifer 1, heifer 2, the reason you separate, is that just the value, or that's just the value, and then after heifer 2, it just goes to
cows.
Slaughter cows?
Cows, yeah. And also that I run them all together, but for purposes of finances, I've got to separate them. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a general range of a brick's reading that gives you kind of an idea of?
Can you speak up a bit, please? Sorry.
You mentioned that the bricks that you deal with kind of shifts everything down.
Yeah.
Is there a window of a bricks that's likely to be that dividing line?
Yes, you shouldn't be below 8 bricks. Yeah. The higher you are, if you go to 12 bricks, you've hit it on the head.
Just for a bit of clarity, the idea is to, before you put the bulls on with the cows, you want to make sure that those cows have ample nutrition and energy to be bred back, correct?
Correct. So you're looking at maximum energy capture, and you time it at a time for your property, and you think of latitude will affect the timing, altitude will affect the timing. So you take into consideration, but when you're starting out, you start out with something that is workable, and you monitor. And when you want to shift the date of calving or putting the bulls in, you do it by 2 weeks and not more. And 2 weeks is enough for your finances not to cause a wreck. If you go to a month and more than a month moving your bulling time, you could run into a financial wreck because you're not getting an income when you expect it. Yes, sir.
I'm risking some pretty intense derision. Is there any justification for calving with fescue in Missouri in the fall because the quality is good then?
I've got no problem with that, and that's one of the things that you've observed and you take note of. So you draw a biological calendar with the existing date of calving at the moment, because you've deduced that it's best to calve in the fall because of fescue. I've got no problem with that whatsoever, and thank you for that question, because it's opened people's minds to the fact that really, I don't care when you calve. But if you live up top in North Dakota and further north, and you are calving in December, I don't mind calling you an idiot.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions there? Yes, sir.
More of an observation, but I live in Missouri, and I've had this problem. And I've talked to my vet about it. And your graph is really awesome in that it points out that the perfect time to calve is May. And we talked about that, and that is 100%. I think everybody will say that. The problem for us in Missouri, and everybody needs to think about this too, is when do you put the bull in for that? That's right in the heat of the summer, July and August. And what our experience in Missouri has been is that the bulls don't breed when it's hot.
Because you don't have South Pole bulls.
I'm not going to. But that is a problem in Missouri.
Don't be complaining then.
This sounds like a competition. I better get something smart to say, but I won't. I respect my host. Yes, sir.
He's got the microphone, so I'll let you have the last word.
No, it can be an issue. I mean, when it's hot, you ask in a bull that breed in July when it's 105 degrees and they're black-hided, you got a problem. And so, yeah, it's something I would be thinking about if I ran black-hided animals. But folks, we left the bulls, and I told you the wreck we had. I'll never do that again, but I do like the April May calving. There's something I just got from Ian. You know, I've been listening to him for gosh knows when. I don't know if y'all caught that or not. When he talked about that, what's that next 30 days costing you? You're leaving your bulls in for 60 days. What's that extra 30 days of calving costing you? You got to keep that nutrition up for 60 days instead of 30. That hit me like a stone in the back of the head a while ago. I'm like, ah, darn it, that's it. And you know, Isaac and I have been talking about this, and that even reconfirmed it for me. We really need to be focusing on 30 days.
That was my question for you. Are you willing to?
Well, we've been talking about it. I think that just pushed me over the hill right there. Yep.
Oh, but it's a South Pole. It can call.
Well, yeah. South Pole does 21 days.
Sorry, at the back. We just finished the back one, and then we'll come forward. Yes.
The web graph you showed about when the most energy is available, that I understood that was kind of an average for the North American continent. Is there any resource we could find that for our particular spot in North America? Would our local agriculture guys even have a clue about that, or where could we find that information for our zip code?
I don't think they've heard of this stuff.
I was afraid of that.
And unfortunately, Dick Diven's fallen off the perch, and his wife has withdrawn all the information on the internet. So I've got the information. So I collected. I went on his course, and I've got all the information. And when I came from the southern hemisphere to his course, I had to send him my information, my latitude, and where I lived, southern hemisphere, etc. And he sent back a rating in terms of the option of getting 100% reconception rate and when I needed to start calving. So remember, I'm in the southern hemisphere, so it's exact opposite to you. And he recommended that I start calving on the 24th of December, which is in the middle of summer, and somebody was talking about mating in the heat of the year. So our heat of the year is on the 24th of December in the middle of our summer. But you know, all the relatives from all over Southern Africa used to come to our place because we as rancher farmers don't pay for anything. And they all congregated there, and I thought, oh, we got a social wreck here, we got a problem. But ultimately it was the best thing I ever did, because at that time I'd already started using my own bulls and form follows function, and I did not get any calving problems because I was using my own bulls. There was no heterosis, and I've never looked at my cattle calving again. It just, if they calve, they shouldn't be alive. You've got to give something to the predators. So it simplified my life, and it's worked extremely well. So by calving in the middle of summer, I'm now mating in the fall, which is getting cooler. The semen is more viable, the bulls are more active, and so it goes on. And I promise you, there are no South Poles in my country.
There should be.
I would die.
I do have a question. I'm going to throw it in front of all of you. For those of people, let's just say you are keeping your bulls in for 60, 90 days, whatever the time period, I don't care. But your goal would be to go to a 30-day. Ian, would this be, I mean, to keep from having a real economic wreck, and let's just say you put your bulls in for 60 days, and then take them out, and then that fall, when you bred check, only keep the ones that were first period bred in the first cycle. Because otherwise you're going to be selling a bunch of open cows. So you could be selling late bred cows, but they're not in your window that you want. I don't want to sell a bunch of open cows, but if they were bred, they'd bring more money.
You can do that. It's not a problem. But ultimately, the 30-day calving period is where you should aim for. And you can do it gradually. So go up, take it a week at a time. Over time, you'll get to 30 days.